We'll also welcome Stephen Wise, Associate Director from the engineering consultants firm Atkins, to present this evening. And after those presentations, we'll move on to a question and answer session. This webinar will be recorded, and that recording will be made available on our website in the coming days. The public consultation began on October 25th and will end on December 5th. During that time, submissions can be made by individuals or by groups such as residents or commercial associations who may wish to bring their opinions together as one, and we welcome your views on all aspects of this proposed 32-kilometre route. We're going to move on now by showing you a short video of the route before we proceed. Apologies, folks, we're just having an issue with sound. We're going to stop that video and start it again if you'd bear with us for one moment. Apologies, folks. This is a live event, and sometimes we come up against tech issues. So, unfortunately, we're having an issue with sharing the audio on that video. Rather than asking you to watch it without audio, what we'll do is direct your attention to our website where you can watch it in full. It's a couple of minutes long, and we'd recommend that you do so afterwards. And we'll make sure it's circulated to everybody who's joined the call by email also. So, sorry for that issue. Sorry, to move on. So you can share your views on this proposal at consult.fingal.ie. And tonight we hope to address any issues or concerns that you may have by answering as many questions as we can in the time we've allotted. So this is your opportunity to ask questions of the Fingal Coastal Way team. And you'll also have an opportunity to meet the team in person at a series of upcoming events, the details of which we are going to share on screen in just a moment. As the presentation progresses tonight, please send us your questions. If you have a question, you can pop it in the Q&A box, which you should find in the top right of your screen. We often find that people will ask similar questions, and in order to get through as many of them as possible this evening, we might paraphrase or merge questions together. So if you don't see your question on screen or asked out exactly as you wrote it, please don't be alarmed. A full transcript of all questions as written will be sent to the project team for them to review after the event. If we have any technical issues, much like the one we just experienced a moment ago, we will endeavour to resolve them as quickly as possible, so please bear with us. In the highly unlikely event that we have an outage and the webinar drops for a moment, we'll send you a new link, and we'll do that using the email address that you used to register for this event, so please keep an eye on that if that occurs. Thanks again for joining us this evening. I can see there's a great number of people in the room now, and with that we'll move on, so I'm going to hand you over to Paul Carroll.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Roisin. Thanks to everyone for joining us this evening for the webinar for the emerging preferred route of the Fingal Coastal Way. Fingal Coastal Way is a strategic greenway scheme that we've been working on for a couple of years now. This is the third stage in the consultation process, the emerging preferred route stage. We think it's a fantastic scheme. It's going to serve the Fingal coast, it's going to serve the communities along the coast, and it's going to link up a lot of the communities and towns with all the amenities that are along that coast. Fantastic shoreline, fantastic scenery. We have been consulting on this for a number of months now, and we're aware that there's a lot of issues along the route. We're endeavouring to address them. I suppose the one takeaway that I would take from a lot of the correspondence that we've received to date is that this is a process. This is not the final route by any stretch, but it's part of a process, and we'll listen to your concerns and we'll do our best to address them. How we do that is through an objective engineering and environmental assessment, which Stephen Wise from our consultant Atkins will go through in a bit more detail later on. but we'd ask you to bear with us during the consultation phase. We have gotten a lot of feedback already during the consultation process, and we will address all the issues that have been raised. We really look forward to delivering this scheme, and I'll hand back to Roisin, who will have information on how we're going to proceed for the rest of the evening. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Paul, for that introduction. Without wasting any further time, we're going to go straight into presentations, and I'll welcome Laura Burke now to present.
Thanks, Roisin. I'm just going to share my screen. I hope you can see that. So just good evening, everyone, and thanks for attending this webinar on the Fingal Coastal Way Emerging Preferred Route. My name is Laura Burke, and I'm an executive engineer and part of the project team in the Planning and Strategic Infrastructure Department in Fingal. I'd just like to give a quick overview of the process, where we are now, and next steps going forward. So our funding partner here is TII, and our consultants are Atkins. The Fingal Coastal Way is a coastal walking and cycling route linking Balbriggan, Skerries, Lough Rush and Donabate. It is a rural and urban greenway extending approximately 31-32 kilometres in length. It is a flagship amenity for local users, both in terms of leisure and sustainable transport. It has the potential to significantly promote and enhance the local tourism across Fingal. Offer an attractive state. So the project benefits meets the criteria outlined in the strategy for future the greenway. 5S criteria to be scenic, sustainable, strategic. That's to see in conjunction with environmental considerations. Just a couple of show how beautiful the coast is taken from. So we want to encourage people to choose sustainable mobility over the effort to keep carbon climate plans. The greenway will look up scale and more urban. These are just two examples. I urge you to check out the drawings from here. Is just a number of things. Strategic then is the last S. Link to the south with which will join onto the proposed Sutton. Also eventually link northwards is a large piece trail or Drogheda, and there are all separate schemes. Just a quick slide on the data from previous consultation, which was held.
Sorry, Laura, just your sound is a bit fuzzy there. It's kind of coming in and out, so I don't know if you could speak closer to the microphone.
Yeah, okay. Is that any better?
That's a bit better, yeah. Thanks.
Okay, so there were 529 submissions received. 262 of these are from the questionnaire, and that gives a total of 791 submissions. That just the little chart there shows that 9%, 21%. Next slide. Just the main themes taken. Report. I'm actually going to go through. Available to view on the website. Just a little snippet. So this consultation, so we're at emerging preferred route stage. So we launched on Tuesday the 25th of October 2022, 6-week online and in-person event. Submissions can be made via the Fingal consultation portal or by letters have been posted to approximately 1,000 affected properties and landowners. Just to give a breakdown on that figure, 600 addresses were captured from the PRAI database. 300 were taken from the air code system registered, and an additional 200 letters went to Turvey and Berriton area. These were a new addition scheme. A lot of effort went into contacting those affected. You, or maybe if you know of someone who didn't get a letter, please get in touch with them. So as well as that, leaflets were delivered to approximately 2,000 homes. Advertisement went out in the national and the local newspapers. If you want to view it on your phone, you can use a QR code to direct you to the dedicated Fingal. We're doing this webinar this evening, before drop-in evenings, which Roisin is already through. So from 8 p.m. we have the Shoreline, Gal and Donabate on the 15th of November, Rush Sailing Club on the 16th of November, Gary's Rugby 22nd, and telling about pre-consultation meetings have been and landowner. This is a list of everything that's available on the consultation portal. The only thing that is not included is the feasibility study options assessment report to be published and available to view this week. Please get your submissions in 11:15 Friday the 5th of November. So where we are now, the roadmap here to the right of your screen is taken from the Code of Best Practice for National and Regional Greenways, which was published very recently. We started this project in 2019, and our progress to date is broadly in line with it. According to the Greenway Guide, we are still at road corridor option. Shows station number 2. I don't know if you can see the bullet point. It is our intention to carry out 4 non-statutory public consultations, just to avoid any confusion on this. So we are currently at public consultation number 3, we're doing 4. Next one will. So further consultations and engagement with. If you have any further questions on this, to address them. Engagement, a good number of submissions and questionnaires is a positive larger community. However, a number of areas. In accordance with the best practice, the next step is to consult with. We'll be doing this. This will landowner engagement commenced in Q3 2020. Landowner a resident. So we are keen to hear from those affected who have not yet been in touch with us. Your details in a submission, we can in touch with you at the next opportunity. Just note that any of your private info, such as addresses and contact, will be moderated and redacted before we upload it to the. Don't be worried about that. A review of all submissions made. Step. Identify all affected commence engagement. Will identify any issues of local. And our agronomist will be available to engage with key stakeholders. All of the above will facilitate the. I've just put up a slide there taken from which is an indicative project timeline. We are at emerging preferred route identification stage. We'll also be going to public consultation again Q3 2023. Thanks for listening, and back to you, Roisin.
Thanks, Laura, for the presentation. Just to comment, I know we're getting some comments in on the Q&A from people who are saying they're having difficulty with audio. We apologise for that. The gremlins just seem to really be taken a liking to our audio issues tonight, so apologies. What we will do afterwards, as I said, we'll send the video around, but we'll also make Laura's slides available for anyone who was struggling to follow along. We've had some audio issues ourselves internally, so some of this is probably due to local bandwidth and some of it is due to bad weather and so on. So we'll do our best to fill in the gaps in information by providing the slides afterwards, and apologies for that. Hopefully that'll improve as we continue this evening. So thanks, Laura, for that presentation. As I said, we're getting those comments and we are reading them as they come in, but we also really welcome your questions. So please don't forget to start putting your questions into the Q&A. We're looking forward to answering as many of them as we can this evening. So I'm going to hand over to Stephen Wise from Atkins now for his presentation. Stephen, if you'd like to come in, please.
Thanks, Roisin. Hopefully you can hear me. Share my screen here. Yeah, so I'll just run through this hopefully fairly quickly, just a brief overview of the process we've undertaken to date, and then quickly sort of run through the preferred route itself. So just, I thought it'd be a good idea just put the vision statement here. This is, this was what guides the whole project from the start. I suppose what the main thing to take away from it is obviously a safe, attractive, environmentally sympathetic coastal walking and cycling route. I think that's probably the key thing, and obviously that's going to serve both pedestrians and cyclists, improve connectivity between towns, and is going to be both local and I suppose a national destination as well. So it's an amenity value to the local residents first and foremost, and then also will improve tourism in Fingal. In terms of key scheme benefits, I think this probably links up with what Laura was saying, the 5 S's there that come from the Greenway Code. Particularly forming part of the East Coast Trail, which will go all the way from Belfast all the way down the coast eventually. Includes linking to the Broadmeadow Way in the south, which is obviously in development currently. It's part of the National Cycle Network, which was published by TII recently. As I said, it's a high-class recreational amenity for local users and will attract tourists from further afield. Links the key coastal towns within the study area, opens up a greater opportunity for sustainable mode trips between and also within them. So, you know, to the school, to shops, train stations, buses, etc. Provides access to key historical sites such as Dromana and the Marco Towers, etc. And in general, would be a segregated greenway for the majority of the route, which would make it very attractive and safe to most people. Particularly in sections which are currently quite inhospitable to these particular modes. In terms of project stages, so these are the TAI project stages as set out in their guidance. Where we're at the minute is phase 2, so that's option selection. Sort of just at the end of that particular phase where we have identified the emerging preferred route. We will then obviously be progressing onwards through design planning, before you get into detailed design and then construction. So they're the kind of the process that we will be following as we go through to delivery. In terms of route selection methodology, so there was effectively sort of 3 stages to this, and I suppose the public consultations sort of align with that. We did do a stage 1 option assessment where we had a long list of potential feasible options. We had about quite a few in each subsection. There was an analysis done on that, multi-criteria analysis, which identified a short list of options at each subsection. We published them at the last public consultation. There were then, I suppose, based on the feedback we got back in those public consultations, there were some modifications and some additional routes and slight changes to routes throughout. They were then assessed again in a multi-criteria analysis, which identified an emerging preferred route for each subsection, and then when we compile all them together, we get the emerging preferred route for the entire project, which is where we're at currently. As I said there, that's I suppose the stage 1 options that we were looking at. So you can see there's quite a lot of routes there that were originally assessed. There was about 10 to 15 per subsection. We got that down to about 3 to 5 routes per subsection, then chosen to progress to stage 2 assessment. In terms of public consultation, so the two we've had previously, so there was one held in around this time 2019, which is on the general study area and the constraints at the time, sort of trying to get local knowledge primarily. And then the stage 1 route options consultation was held last year in April or May. And that was where we showed all the routes we had assessed, we showed the details of the assessment and which routes were progressing to the second stage. So I think Laura's kind of gone through the quantity of feedback we got on that. And the outcomes of it were there was a lot of common issues raised by the public, which we identified, and they were considered as we brought the routes forward to the stage 2 assessment. We were able to start direct landowner engagement as far as we could at the time, and we were able to get access to some properties which we couldn't previously, so that was very useful. There were, as I said, there were some additional routes added in various subsections and some local modifications in routes as well, based off the feedback we got back from the public and stakeholders. The other one that was sort of added in then was subsection 1B, which wasn't originally included in the brief, which is the link from Channel Road in Rush to the new Rogerstown Park there. That is now being included in the scheme, as it gives a lot more certainty in terms of the route. It removes a lot of risks when we get to planning stage. So the stage 2 detailed assessment, as you can see on the right there, that table is everything that was included in the multi-criteria analysis. So each route is compared to each other under those, I think it's 50 different criteria. We've tried to use quantitative data as far as possible, so removing any biases, etc. And each subsection, so there's 8 subsections in total across the entire route, was assessed separately. So this multi-criteria analysis was carried out for each of those 8 subsections. And the result of that is the emerging preferred route itself. And just to quickly run through it, in case anyone hasn't seen it yet. So starting at the Fingal Meath border north of Balbriggan, we are primarily following along the coast side of the railway there. It's fairly straightforward for that section. As we come into Balbriggan, again, following along beside the railway, primarily through Breamore Park, the proposed park there, and then effectively winding our way around the park there onto the, I suppose it will be a promenade, I think, in the future. Currently a trail there along the beach on the embankment of the railway line. Down into the harbour area down here, which is obviously being redeveloped, and then sharing space with vehicles there through the local roads and onto Sea Point here. And from there then along Sea Point there will be a section just here which will need a localized shuttle system for vehicles, and then into the Bower, Fancourt Heights and Hampton Cove, following the roads there primarily in the green spaces beside them, before coming back out onto the R127, and from there we are generally running on the coast side of the road. And that continues on, I suppose, as we're heading into Skerries, just following along beside the road on the coast side of it. A new bridge will be proposed to get into Argillan. The exact location of that is still to be determined. And from there, again, there's a new bridge over the access down to the beach here as well is required. And then following the R127, I suppose, into Skerries along the coast side, that section of road will become a one-way road. Again, all the details of that will need to be discussed and further developed. But it would be envisaged to be one-way as far as Northcliffe Heights, so there's a loop created. Again, following the R127, as far as possible until we get to the Horror Rock, where it diverts into the residential areas, so through the Horror Rock and Key Street, and then basically working its way out to the promenade along the beach there and Skerries. So it follows that along pretty much until it pops out onto the R128 at the end of that existing trail, and then is following the road locally there past the rugby club, before diverting in or back out towards the coast, so away from the road, and that is set back a little bit from the coast, I suppose primarily for coastal erosion reasons, just to ensure that it's not going to be affected by climate change in the future. And that sort of continues all the way along those fields before diverting back up to Mine Road here, where it'll be on road sharing with the vehicles there. There's quite low volumes of traffic. To be a sort of a link into Lough Shinny down to the beach and the harbour, which will primarily be on road. And continuing on southwards then, again following field boundaries primarily, past Dromana, so outside of Dromana to avoid impacting that obviously important archaeological site. Again, winding its way along field boundaries as far as possible. A new bridge proposed over the existing stream that flows out into the sea here. So new bridge at that location. And then briefly sort of sharing the road here again, low volumes and low speeds behind the caravan park here, and then diverting into the bottom of these fields to, as I suppose it runs parallel to 6 Cross Lane there. Again, so following those field boundaries, plan would be to culvert that stream locally, which would hopefully improve the flooding issues in that area as well. Before we find our way out onto Killbush Lane, again, that'll be a shared space with vehicles locally. The plan would be to close Killbush Lane at this end, just to allow for permeability for pedestrians and cyclists. Again, traffic would be able to divert around to get to that. Southwards then along Bawn Road, again, it'd be a shared space there. And then down, I suppose this an existing sort of trail here that comes out into the car park at the South Beach and Rush, so that'll be all upgraded through the car park and then out onto South Shore Road. The plan for South Shore Road would be that would become a one-way system for traffic as well. So half the road would be taken for the Greenway, with the remaining half being left for the vehicles. Again, the details of direction and etc. will need to be worked out as we go through in consultation. So that would carry along all the way along South Shore Road until we get to just past the Sailing Club, where we travel up towards Spout Road, the Spout Road, Tanner Road junction there. Again, primarily be on beside the road there or just inside the park before we turn westwards, heading along the sort of local road that serves a few houses there along the estuary. Locally, you have to divert around. There's one house in particular there, just to avoid the sea, basically. And then we are following along the northern side of the Rogerstown estuary, just at the bottom of those fields, trying to stick to the boundaries as far as possible, under the railway, and then back up into Rogerstown Park. So following the existing path here. And then we will be crossing the estuary, so there'll be a new bridge structure required across the estuary here. The exact location of East Cross Railway as well, the exact location of that, I think is still to be determined fully. That will be subject to further detail and consultation as well with the local area. From there, we're generally following Beaverstown Road. Again, that'll be sort of at the side of the road there, before we sort of divert westwards under the railway and then out through Turvey Drive and Turvey Green there, which brings us to the existing ped crossing across Turvey Avenue and into Newbridge House. And from there, we are following the existing pathways within Newbridge House to bring us to the house itself. So that's just a whistle-top tour of the route. All the drawings are obviously online for availability, and they'll be available for viewing as well at the in-person meetings. So I would encourage everyone to have a look at them, go through them in as much detail as you think, and we'd love to get your feedback. So that's the end of my presentation. Thanks very much, Roisin.
Thanks, Stephen. And I think hopefully, I'm not jinxing it by saying we've left our audio issues behind, and the audio seemed to work very well there. So as we said earlier, for those of you who maybe joined and missed that first part of the presentation, or who were struggling with the audio in Laura's piece, we're going to provide those slides as well as the video of the route out by email to everybody in the coming days for anyone who missed any of the content. So thanks, Stephen, for that route overview. I can see the questions are flowing in, so I'm not going to waste any time talking at this stage, and we're going to move straight into the Q&A. So the first question that's come in, this person has commented saying they welcome the route overall, but they find it difficult to comprehend why we're passing through Turvey Estate, which is a quiet and peaceful estate, and want to know, would the alternative route shown in the maps make more sense as you're passing through the village and connecting to the train station? Paul, would you like to come in there?
Thanks, Roisin. Yeah, I suppose we've gone through a route option process the last time around, and I'm conscious that the Turvey Avenue route wasn't in the last set of route options that we had consulted on, so people are seeing this for the first time. After looking in more detail at the previous route options that were part of the last process and having gone through the analysis under all the various criteria, we have come down with the option that's shown in the drawings. Now, we are conscious that it is affecting a cul-de-sac there, which I know people have been in touch with us on that, the residents, and we're happy to meet with them we're happy to meet with them directly over the course of the next few weeks as well. I suppose the other thing to say on that is that Donabate Village will be subject to an urban framework plan by ourselves over the next year, and that will look at providing a much more vibrant urban setting for the main street and for connections from the main street to the train station and back towards Newbridge Domain. So whilst we're showing the Turvey route as part of this project, the longer term route we would see as being more to the east. We have planning permission, and we're close to we're in the middle of a procurement process for a contractor to build a new bridge, pedestrian and cycling bridge, to the south of the existing road bridge there, just south of the train station. So that will provide connectivity across the rail line, coming up to the south of Smith's Pub, and then the urban framework plan will pick up at the southern end of Main Street essentially, and bring cycling and walking and much better urban environment along the main street and linking back into the coast route at the northern end of the village. There's also the Broadmeadow Way, which is coming from Malahide, which we're still at the detailed design stage of that. We're working with Irish Rail on that, but we would hope that will be in place in 3 years, and that will eventually come up through development lands to the east of the railway line as well, again linking in with the bottom of Main Street. So whilst we're showing the route going through the Turvey Estate, we would propose that it would be a relatively low impact, low infrastructure type intervention there, and longer term we wouldn't see massive numbers using that route, because ultimately the longer term route we think will be to the village to the east of the railway line. Motion.
Thanks. So the next question that's come in is, you're proposing to put the coastal way through South Shore Road in Rush, which is a highly residential area and can be very tight in places. Can you give a little bit more detail around the plan here? Stephen, would you mind answering this one, please?
Yeah, so I suppose as I sort of alluded to there in the presentation, the plan is that will become a one-way road for traffic. So again, it'll be half and half, will be the intention as far as possible. There certainly is pinch points along it. The extent of that we won't know until we get a full topographical survey done of that. There's still a bit of design work to come on that. I suppose the other thing to kind of point out as well as part of this consultation and going forward is that the exact functioning of that, the direction that makes sense, or how the traffic could circulate around the area, that all will still need to be obviously discussed and agreed as well. So I would say there is quite a lot of people walk on that road currently. So I think it would improve safety, even if there was no greenway going in there. It certainly would improve safety in the area. So I think there is a benefit to that as well, separately.
Thanks, Stephen, for that answer. So the next question that's come in is around the reporting that's been published. Why was there a detailed report published for Skerries and not for Balbriggan? And I'm going to bring Cian O'Gallagher in here to answer that.
Oh yeah, as part of our 2001 feasibility and route options public consultation, we published between 2 and 5 route options along the entire route, with the exception of a number of areas, and one of those was Skerries. Given that we, at that stage, at the feasibility stage, identified only one feasible option to move forward, that's all that was published during that 2001 public consultation. That provided us an opportunity to accelerate future elements and phases of the scheme for that area of Skerries, particularly around Rock and Key Street. So as we didn't foresee any other feasible options emerging, we brought forward the preliminary design phase to an earlier phase. We're not at that phase as yet, even in this public consultation or this phase of the project, but in order to engage in the earliest possible consultation, we presented an initial report showing some options for the Skerries area. We've had some feedback on that, and we're reviewing those proposals based on the feedback we've received, and we're considering some other options through that area. In terms of other areas like Fancourt and the Bower in Balbriggan, there were more than one option remaining at our last public consultation. We engaged with residents from those areas, listened to what they had to say, and narrowed down our options to one remaining option. So from the previous consultation in 2001, where we had multiple options left, we were not in a position to disclose what our best option was to any individual group until we published it live. So everyone had to get that information at the same time. So we've accelerated our consultation with Skerries because we only foresaw one feasible route through that location. Parts of Donabate, Rush, and Balbriggan had multiple options left. So that's why we've published for everyone to see at the same time what our route corridor options look like. So I hope that answers the question for now. Thanks, Roisin.
Thanks, Cian, for that clarification. Stephen, I'm going to come back to you now, and this question is somebody's asked, in relation to subsection 1D, why is the route changed significantly to those that were previously presented? Can you comment there, please?
Yep. I think subsection 1D is primarily around the area of Rush. So again, after the previous public consultation and the landowner liaison we carried out around the area, there was some additional and modified routes, and I suppose that was across the board, not just in subsection 1D. I think that the only change really in subsection 1D is there was an additional route added which used some fields following field boundaries parallel to 6 Cross Lane rather than using 6 Cross Lane. I think the rest of them were all included in the previous one. So that change primarily came out of this was consultations with landowners in that area and actually getting access onto some of those sites as well. So that was where that came out of.
Thanks for that clarification, Stephen. So another question now around a specific area of the route. And Cian, I'm going to put this one to you again, which is what side of the road is the proposed plan going down at Sea Point in Balbriggan?
Yeah, that hasn't been decided as yet. So the area from Sea Point into the harbour will have to link into what proposals the Balbriggan team are looking at for doing up the harbour. So we haven't any concrete plans there. There are a number of properties closely abutting the side of the road there. So we will have to look at some shuttle systems, maybe some shared surfacing where cyclists are on road, and all those elements that will involve traffic calming, the slowing of traffic and all that. But as I said, I suppose in my previous answer, we haven't developed a preliminary design yet. We are before that, and we're looking for feedback into our route corridor that we've published today. So those designs aren't in place. We have escalated them, as I said, for one of the areas in Skerries. What you've seen, some of you may have seen for Skerries, we'll be producing further on in the project. And following this public consultation, we'll be developing up those plans further, for which there will be one more non-statutory public consultation next year, where those plans will be firmed up following this consultation process.
Thanks, Cian. I'm going to stay with you now for a moment for the next question, which is somebody's asked, why have the team not consulted with all landowners or occupiers prior to publishing this part of the new emerging route? And they want to know, have we can we confirm that we have followed all steps according to the Code of Best Practice for Greenways 2021?
Yeah, so the Code of Practice for Greenways was produced in 2021 and sent to us at the end of 2021. Previously, we have been funded by the Department of Tourism and Transport. That has changed to TII. So our old project appraisal guidelines for the department have changed slightly and tweaked slightly. So we are in our third public consultation phase. The TII Rural Greenway guidelines show the third consultation phase as a much more advanced stage of the project than we're in. We've actually undertaken an additional public consultation phase to this stage. We are at what's called route corridor options. So we've published our route corridor and we're looking at the options along that corridor. It's only following this and at the next stage that we engage with landowners. We've actually commenced engagement with landowners at our previous stage, our stage 1 feasibility route options, we call it. They call it constrained stage. So while we are at public consultation 3 for the Fingal Coastal Way, that correlates to public consultation number 2 and phase 2 of the new National Greenway Guidance. And that's where we are aligning ourselves to our new funding partners who have taken over Greenway funding from the department.
Thanks, Cian. So moving on from that concern now, somebody's asked, when will the build start and when do we expect it to complete? Paul, can I put that one to you, please?
Thanks, Roisin. This is a massive project for Fingal, and it's a massive project on a national scale. It's a 32-kilometer route. It's going through urban and rural settings. It's going through and near special areas of conservation. It's going through very environmentally sensitive areas. We're doing, as Cian outlined, as much consultation as we can. Up to now, we're going to continue doing that consultation. So we would envisage a planning application going to On Board Planola in 2024. They generally take at least a year to give a decision on that. So assuming that was a positive outcome, we would go to site then, detailed design and site. You're talking, you know, at the earliest 3 to 4 years before it went to site. How it's actually built, we've had previous questions on, will it be one long construction site for 32 kilometers or will it be phased over a number of years? That'll all be teased out when we get into the more detailed design section stage of the project. Given the scale of the scheme and the length of the scheme, it's likely to take 2 to 3 years to build, and it may take place over a number of different phases and a number of different contracts. So it's kind of early to say exactly how that'll look at this stage, but it is a relatively slow process, given the kind of complexities that we need to deal with, and given that we do want to make sure that we have time to talk to everyone. Conscious that people are saying in the Q&A that we haven't been talking to everyone, but we have made a lot of efforts, as Laura outlined in her presentation, in terms of contacting hundreds of landowners along the route, hundreds of residents. Thousands of letters went out, leaflet drops, events like this. So we'll keep working through that. But yeah, construction, assuming it's positive grant permission, is a number of years away yet. Okay.
Thanks, Paul. You mentioned archaeological sites and SICs there, so we have a question on that topic exactly, which is what consideration has been given to archaeological sites, special protection areas and special areas of conservation? This person is concerned that the route crosses or seems to be in close proximity to several sites of that type along the route. Stephen, would you like to come in and comment there?
Yeah, I suppose hopefully it might have been fairly clear. That table that I had up in the presentation that showed all the criteria that with the multi-criteria analysis included. Environment is one of the main headings that we include in any analysis. And part of that is obviously archaeology, cultural heritage, ecology, impacts and SPAs, SACs. They're all considered in a lot of detail. Our environmental team have been involved in this from the very start. They have input into the routes from the very start. Certainly not trying to go over their head at any point. They're a fundamental part of this process. So they are very much considered. As I said, obviously the point of a multi-criteria analysis is that you're looking at a lot of different factors, and that's why we do it. So it's not one thing outweighing another necessarily. I suppose obviously important to note as well, as the scheme is fully designed in the next phase, that we will have to do an environmental impact assessment and probably an Natura impact statement as well. So there's a lot more, I suppose, to come in terms of the environmental analysis, and that'll all obviously form part of the planning application that goes into the board. So yeah, it's a fundamental part of what we do, and it is very much considered at all points.
Thanks, Stephen. I'm going to stick with you for the next question, if you don't mind, which is somebody's asked, what commuters do we envision using the route?
Well, I suppose, there is, as part of the appraisal process, there is a demand management forecast to be done that is going to happen pretty much straight after this consultation. The plan, obviously, nationally, internationally even, is obviously improving sustainable modes. The fact that there isn't much happening currently owes a lot to the fact that the infrastructure in the area is quite poor, particularly between the towns. You are kind of taking your life in your hands sometimes on those roads, whereas a dedicated greenway is obviously going to be a much more attractive route. So that is going to, the plan is that would help to encourage people to switch to those sustainable modes. And then obviously linking to particular areas of interest, so schools, the train stations, etc. That's kind of the plan, is that when you have something that is safe and attractive, that people will switch to it. So I don't think in this case that past performance is necessarily a predictive indicator. So yeah, that'll be the plan, is that there will be an assessment done on it. I don't have the numbers yet. That will be part of the next stage, but certainly we'll be trying to hit the targets that nationally have been set.
Thanks, Stephen. I hope that answers that person's question. Somebody has asked now about the Hampton Cove area and said, why are you planning to run the greenway down the main road of Hampton Cove Estate? And will this mean that homeowners may be in a position where they have to reverse their cars out onto the greenway to get out of their driveways? Cian, we're going to put that question to you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, at the previous consultation, we had an option going around Hampton Cove, the Bower area, and an option going along the Skerries Road through Fancourt Road and into Balbriggan, into meeting the Balbriggan Harbour Upgrade Scheme from there. For us to continue from the most southern access into Fancourt straight along the main road would require additional CPO of land associated with private residences. By us going up through Hampton Cove and around by the bar, we're avoiding some CPOs to residents in the areas because of the lack of road width at that location. Guidance dictates that if we can avoid CPO, we should. And in this case, that's what we're doing. So we had met with Hampton Cove Borough residents. They have put their concerns to us. But we would regard CPOing of private gardens and possible property where we have an option, a viable option, as something that kind of overrides some of the concerns that were raised with us, and they're concerns that we believe can be designed out without much issue. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Cian. So somebody's asked now, are new designating parking areas being provided along the route of the Greenway, or is it envisioned that traffic will be parking in private and residential areas along the route? Stephen, I might go to you on that one.
Yeah, I suppose at the minute, obviously we're at emerging preferred route stage. Stuff like the ancillary facilities, which would include, say, parking or, typically people probably envisage maybe trailheads for the more rural ones. So there'd be no decisions have been made on that at this stage. What I would say is that I suppose this particular greenway is maybe a little bit different to some of the other ones, which are a bit more rural, don't have connections. This is obviously quite urban for a lot of it. Will have excellent connections to public transport, trains, buses, etc. So the hope would be that you wouldn't have people necessarily driving to get to it. And particularly, I suppose, as it gets linked up to the south and the north, that it becomes a continuous route at that stage. So look, it is something in terms of trailheads and facilities, etc., that will need to be developed as part of the next phase. But I think this is maybe a slightly more unique greenway than some of the other ones. So I would imagine there wouldn't be a huge amount of parking required, but again, that still needs to be worked out.
Thanks, Stephen. Cian, I'm going to come back to you now. Somebody has asked a question, which I think is an important one. You referred to 4 non-statutory consultations earlier on, and they're asking, can you explain what that means?
Yeah, so we're in a non-statutory process. So this is a consultation process. All our phases are consultation processes. A statutory consultation is a consultation undertaken through a planning process. So a Part 8 process or a planning application. Requirements of those processes where a local authority is developing a development themselves have legal stipulations for consultation to run through those through those planning applications. These are non-statutory. There's no legal requirement for us to undertake these consultations. And again, going back to the new TII guidance, we're at our public consultation 3. Their public consultation 3 is at a much later stage. And I believe there has been some confusion. I've seen a couple things come in on the chat on that. Their public consultation 2 is where we are now at our public consultation 3. And I think we will send out a clarification on that to the landowners who have been in touch with us early next week on exactly where we sit, because there is some confusion about the new guidance and what we've done already and where exactly we sit in the project and what stage of development it's at. And that may be as a result of the fact that we've gone ahead with parts of Skerries. We're at a much earlier stage at other phases. So I think we should provide a clarification to landowners on that early next week through our dedicated project liaison email address that we have with them. So we'll issue something on that for them next week.
Thanks, Cian. I hope that's reassuring for those who are concerned about that. So the next question that's come in is in relation to our cooperation and collaboration with other councils, and someone has asked, what engagement have we had with Meath County Council in relation to the route that runs through Meath to Drogheda? Will Fingal County Council be the lead authority to deliver the East Coast Trail overall? I'm going to put that to Cian. Paul is going to take that question. Apologies.
Thanks, Roisin. Yeah, so the East Coast Trail, I suppose, is kind of a national level scheme that runs along the entire East Coast, and it's a key part of the Greater Dublin Area transport strategy, and obviously the Fingal section will be a key element of that. As part of that, we're working with Meath and talking to them on a regular basis. We're a little bit ahead of them in terms of they haven't got as far as us in terms of the section from the Fingal boundary in Meath up north towards Mornington. They are working on the Boyne Greenway, all right, which goes west of Drogheda, but they haven't done the coastal section yet. So we are conscious that ultimately we'll try to link in with them. And when we get to the more detailed section in the next stage of how to design the short section linking in there at the Delvin River, at the very northern end of our scheme, we'll hopefully have more certainty on where they're going to be bringing their future route, and we'll do our best to tie into that as we can. So yeah, it's a good question. This is quite a strategic route. It's going to form, a really good route along the entire East Coast, hopefully in a number of years, and give people a really good option for for getting around the villages locally and for getting to nearby villages as well, without having to rely on the car.
Thanks, Paul. Moving on from the kind of wider route questions to a more specific one about how the greenway will be used in the future. Someone has asked, will there be a facility to close parts of the route during adverse weather conditions and weather warnings like the ones we often see this time of year? Stephen, would you like to come in and comment there?
Yeah, don't think we'd envisage that now at this stage. Again, you know, a lot of details like that would need to be worked out. I suppose people, if there is a weather warning, adverse conditions of that severity, people tend not to be on greenways. So it probably wouldn't be needed, but certainly something we could consider.
Thanks. Another question here, just to note before we get into this one, it's just coming up to 8 o'clock now and we had planned to finish at 8, but we're going to just try and squeeze a couple of extra questions in. We're very conscious that there's a lot of questions coming in and that no matter how long we stay on tonight, we wouldn't be able to get to all of them, but we'll do our best. And again, I'll remind you of those events that are coming up next week and the week after at the end of this presentation, and we'd welcome you to come along and ask your questions in person if we didn't manage to get to your question this evening. So with that, I'll go on to one final one, which is there any other coastal way or greenway in Ireland that goes directly through a heavily populated residential area in a town or in many towns? Paul, would you like to answer that?
Thanks, Roisin. I suppose there's not that many coastal greenways in Ireland to begin with. I know there are a number of greenways around Ireland, some of them coastal, a lot of them in the Midlands. A lot of them done to date have been on historic railway lines and where there's been a reservation already. And I suppose that's where we're different, and we have, you know, a significant challenge for us is to engage constructively with all the landowners along the route that are going to be affected by this. In terms of the urban sections, then a lot of them that have been done to date haven't tackled that issue of getting the greenway from the rural area into the heart of the town or village that they're terminating in or that they're passing through. That's, I think, a significant weakness in those schemes. What we're trying to do is we're trying to provide a continuous high quality route that people of all ages can use without, you know, negatively impacting too much on the existing amenity that the residents and the people living in those villages enjoy. It's also to try to get the benefit of the scheme for the local people, so that, you know, a lot of the towns and villages that we're passing through, they're not big villages. To cycle across from one end of Skerries to the other is not, you know, it's if you have a continuous high quality route, it's a few minutes. It's not a massive distance, but at the moment it's not something you do, probably unless you're an experienced cyclist, or, you know, kids wouldn't do it probably on their own because it's not conducive to that. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we have a continuous route into and through these villages and towns that, you know, is usable by people locally to get to restaurants, to the pubs, the restaurants, the bars in the town, the shops, and to get to the schools and the sports facilities and the beaches and everything else that's there. That is a challenge. I mean, we talked earlier about the Key Street Horrock section in Skerries, which, you know, we'll work through that as best we can, as well as the other areas in the urban areas in Donabate and Balbriggan especially. But we really do want to, you know, make the most of this route and make sure that we can design the best route that it does serve the people as best we can, and that means getting the continuity into the heart of those villages and towns that people want to go. Thanks, Roisin.
Thanks, Paul. So another question's come in here, this time around cost, and somebody's asked, what's the final projected cost of this 32-kilometre leg of coastal greenway? Cian or Stephen, would you like to come in here? I'm not sure who'd like to take this one. Work away there, Cian. Apologies.
Yeah, our present high-level costs, given the level we're at in terms of design and all that, would put the scheme in the region of 60 million. Following on from developing a preferred route, following this corridor consultation, we would be looking at developing preliminary business costs based on government tools that are available in terms of the cost of a scheme like this. So while we have high level figures of around 60 million, as we progress through the various phases of the scheme, we become more certain on what exactly we're building and installing, and those costs will be reviewed and updated. So at present, we're looking at a scheme in the region of 60 million. That's what we're proposing. Thank you.
Thanks, Cian, for that clarification. So another question's come in here now around planning, and somebody's asked what role has the Office of the Planning Regulator got, if any, in validating that people impacted by the proposals are treated equally and fairly by us throughout the process of designing the Fingal Coastal Way and putting it in place. I'm going to put that question to Cian again, if you don't mind, Cian.
Yeah, again, we're not in a statutory planning process at the minute. What we're in is a pre-planning consultation phase, for which we have government spending rules to follow and those kind of things. So, as I said, the CII guidance for rural, urban or rural greenways recommends 3 public consultation phases, pre-planning consultation. We'll have done 4 before that commences. So we're exceeding current guidance. Thank you.
Thanks, Cian. We've come just past 8 o'clock now, and we've gotten through quite a number of questions. As we said, we've tried to get through as many as we can in the time allotted for this evening. I'm just going to go back to Paul Carroll. Paul, before we wrap up for this evening, is there any particular piece of information that you'd like to leave people with as they consider the Fingal Coastal Way?
Yeah, I suppose just to thank everyone for bearing with us at the start there with the technical difficulties. This is a process, I suppose. I said it at the start. This is a process. We want to kind of, we want people to buy into this as much as we can, as much as they can, and